The disclaimer. And remember that my Patreon supporters got to see preview images, work in progress shots, and high resolution images of the completed figure. Plus, they know how ridiculously long it took for me to make this thing. So, yeah, let's just start the theme song. Hello my friends, this is Wake Angel 2001 coming at you with a long overdue commission for Gummie the Duchy, who wanted a Death Egg robot. Now Gummie wanted the robot to be as accurate as possible to the Sonic Generations model, which is kind of like the Sonic Forces model I did, but with the face. Now, I decided that I would try some new techniques to try and increase the accuracy to how it looks and make it easier to make Death Egg robots in the future, since they're always a very involved project that involves a lot of fabrication, and since, craft foam and foam board is lightweight, but it's not super durable or super waterproof, so I'm always afraid that the poor things are going to break if they're not handled properly. So I decided to try some new techniques, and amazingly enough, this ended up adding such a ridiculously long time to the project that I can't believe that Gummie was still enthusiastic about it when it was finished. So yeah, let's talk about the extremely long process that came to making this figure. Suppose I can start with the parts that were like any other Death Egg robot. In this case, we're going to start with the head, which, yes, is the same Burger King Pokeball with a face made out of craft foam. It doesn't have ears this time because the ears were kind of the original Genesis model had ears and the comic book version had ears, but the Sonic Forces the Sonic Forces didn't have a face, but the Sonic Generations version of the Death Egg robot didn't have, the things. But what it did have was a big smiling face instead of just a line of teeth. So that meant that I had to put a little bit more decoration into the lid of the Kool-Aid container that makes a cockpit holder. Now this is where I encountered a problem with this particular adaptation, in that the Kool-Aid container isn't tall enough to reveal the mouth when I stuck it into the ball body. So this had to be remedied by when I making the cockpit floor like always, but elevating it up a bit. Here you can see in front of and behind the hip assembly, you see those white things. That's where I had to increase the height of this of the cockpit tube, which is what I'm going to call it, using some extra epoxy sculpt to make sure that the smile would be able to breach the top of the dome, as it were. So, after a quick paint job, with a little bit of craft foam to make relief decorative bits, of course, you have the torso of the Death Egg robot, along with, the standard Bionicle and Hero Factory joints that make, the articulation points. So this part actually didn't take very long. I mean, this is just the same bog standard stuff that I do all the time for making the Death Egg robots. And then I went on to making the backpack. Every Death Egg robot has a backpack, but I couldn't use my old templates this time because I wanted to make a more unique shape, because it's the actual video game incarnation of the Death Egg robot rather than the simpler version from the comics. But yeah, it's the same thing: craft foam, foam board, and this funny little jar thing. It's I think it's supposed to keep beads or something in it, but I found it was perfect for that. I'm guessing it's either a battery pack or a fuel intake for the robot, or maybe it launches missiles. Anyway, it can go in the back. And as a bonus, it still unscrews, so you have a tiny little storage compartment on the back of your Death Egg robot. That'll be kind of fun. Put some little hidden thing in there. Maybe a small animal, like a Flicky or something. I started making the arms like I did last time, with those novelty shot glasses you can get from Party City, which are made of plastic, cutting a hole in the bottom of them and sticking the Bionicle part inside to be the elbow joint, held in place with some epoxy sculpt to make sure it wouldn't wiggle out, of course. Now this is where I diverted from the last time, because this is where I wanted to be able to just make Death Egg robots in the future that would be consistent and and more durable. So, making things out of plastic is better than making them out of craft foam and wood, and having a part that I can fabricate on hand rather than having to go to the store and rely on buying, last time I used Pokeballs from the Mega Constructs Pokemon thing, but I didn't want to rely on that. So enter the 3D printer. This is a fully 3D printed Death Egg robot hand, sized to basically fit over the top of that shot glass thing like a lid, basically. This model actually took me some time to refine, and I actually had to literally learn how to do it. Like I said, this Death Egg robot took 9 months to do, and when I first started it, I actually didn't know how to use my 3D printer very well. So, yeah, this is me actually learning how to use new technology to make my custom toys. I mean, nowadays I use it to print out Rouge parts or those little minifigures I make, but yeah, this was a real challenge for me. And I still had to use a little bit of sculpting, like those little bolt things on, for want of a better term, the wrist, because, making that shape in a 3D printer would have been more difficult, and precisely machining it to fit over that, a little bit of sculpting is still good. Like, I don't want to have to, epoxy sculpt is tough. I don't have to worry about it breaking, so that's fine. Although, that little shoulder pad thing is still made out of, a half of a cheap yo-yo. I figured the world is never going to run out of cheap yo-yos that you can get for kids' goodie bags at Party City. And so that left me with a Death Egg robot that had an upper body, but still nothing but little sticky Hero Factory Bionicle parts for legs. So I had to go on and make the most important part of the figure, the legs. Well, rather, the decorative elements of the legs. And this took a long time because I agonized over this. Let's get into what I came up with. Okay, so let's start with this thing. I know it kind of looks like an abstract model of a car, but this is the Death Egg robot's foot. Yep, that's a foot. It has the basic planar shapes and the toes and all that stuff. And I printed these two separate parts. They are the things that go on the ankles to look like technological greeble, moving parts and stuff. It's all decorative elements. I know it doesn't look like much, but with a little bit of sculpt to shape out the toes and a proper paint job, you actually get a better idea of what everything is supposed to be now. Yeah, and I also painted those little things that go on the side, and the result is a foot. Yes, very much a Death Egg robot's foot. That definitely looks like a foot. Relatively accurate to the way that the foot looks in the video games compared to how I had been making them before, which just kind of look like, shoes. The shins are also 3D printed parts. These are actually among the largest 3D printed pieces that I've ever made for anything. They are indeed more voluminous than those tiki heads that I printed out for the wedding cake topper. I also made like something that looks similar to a Mario coin to resemble the bolts that go on the knees of the robot. And I'm especially proud of this one, the thigh. The thigh basically just looks like that big screw that goes into the hip. But this one I actually made in such a way that the bionicle part that makes the thigh joint, it goes inside of a little chasm inside of it in just the right way that it allows it to move around without actually, showing as much of the part as possible. The Hero Factory parts are kept inside using epoxy sculpt as adhesive. Very strong stuff. I am highly confident that these will not break. They won't pop out. They won't accidentally tear, and you don't have to worry about submerging your figure in water because it's made out of plastic and, is not water soluble. So, that's great. So with all that said, let's take a look at the fully assembled Death Egg robot and see what my baby looks like now. You see, I call him my baby because he took 9 months to develop. Hardy har har. But in all seriousness, this is a big old 12-inch tall Death Egg robot. Yep, it's huge, and he actually has that same natural bent knee stance that the actual Death Egg robot in the video game does. My previous Death Egg robot stood up on straight legs, but that was really more like what the comic book version looked like, not how he actually stands in the games. Given a full 360, you see from all angles, he's a big, brawny robot. Maybe not as many details, but, you know, I figured, like all that wasn't really necessary, just make it look nice. But yeah, he's fully articulated, just like all my other Death Egg robots, and you can unscrew his head to put a Dr. Eggman figure in the cockpit if you really want, and that's all just fine, isn't it? Got a big old posable Death Egg robot, and hopefully, now that I have the 3D parts made, next time someone asks for one, I'll be able to get it done a bit quicker. This is Wake Angel 2001, signing off.